Alright guys, in this video we are going to talk about our final project and learn how to use another library to actually build our project. So for our next project I have created a simple but nice design using Figma that we will use to kickstart our portfolio. So our portfolio will use the GitHub REST API to pull projects and fill up the design. But before that, so before we can actually start building the portfolio, we need to learn how to use Axios to make HTTP requests to the GitHub REST API. So to quote Wikipedia, a REST API is a software architectural style that enables the requesting system to access and manipulate a textual representation of a web resources. So what this actually means is that our view application will be the requesting system that will request a textual representation from GitHub of our repositories that are the actual web resource. And we can use later this information and manipulate them to showcase our project inside our portfolio. For our final project, we will use this library called Axios that will help us to make HTTP requests to the GitHub REST API. We can install Axios in multiple ways, but we will keep things simple and use the CDN. There are also the methods we can use to install it, and they are all available inside the documentation. So let's first have a look at the documentation for this package. Let me open it in the browser. I'm over here. So this is the package that we will use, and if we visit this page and click on install, you see that we have multiple ways to install it, and the way we are going to use is the unpkg CDN. So we will grab this link and copy it inside an HTML file. So let me do that. Let me copy this link and move here. So let me create a new file for our index HTML file, and we use method to create the structure, and we can say Axios tutorial. It's going to be really straightforward what we are going to do. So before the closing Axios, so before the closing HTML tag for the body, we will copy this script tag for Axios. So why we have used this CDN instead of the other one? It's because the unpkg CDN gives us always the latest version of Axios, and that's why I'm going to use it. But if you want, you can also specify different version number. So it's all in the documentation. If you want to learn more, just visit it at the end of the video. So after that, so we have this structure and we have this link for the CDN. But we need, of course, to have if we want to use Axios inside Vue.js, we also need a link to the CDN of Vue.js, and we will copy it just here. And after that, we also want a script for our main JavaScript file. So this one, and we can put it in here. So we have everything we need, all the building blocks, except that I haven't created the main.js file. So that's the file where we will write all our code. Okay. So we need one more thing to do, and it's the root element for our Vue.js application. So with an ID of app. Okay, so now we have all the building blocks. So this code here, it doesn't do anything new. I mean, we already know everything. But let's break it piece by piece. So we have a basic HTML structure, and before the closing body tag, we placed two script tags, one for Axios and the other one for Vue.js. In the body tag, we created a root element for our Vue application that we called app, so it has an ID of app. Finally, before the end of the body tag, we placed a new script tag that points the file to the file where we will actually write all the code, so this main.js file. So now that we have everything in place, we are ready to make our first API call and request data from the GitHub API. But before that, let's quickly see what is an HTTP request, so what is an API call, and what kind of requests we can make. So a HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It is an application layer protocol designed to communication between 2 points. So a web client, so the browser, and a web server. This protocol allows transmission of data like HTML files, and it defines verbs, also known as methods, that can be used to perform specific actions on a given resource. The method or verb that we will use for our project is the get method that we will use to make calls to the REST API that GitHub gives us. So this get method, as you might guess, is used to obtain or get the resources from the web server. There are also other methods that we can use. Get is one of these methods to retrieve data, but we have also post, which is used to send data. Put is used to update the entire representation of the data. Patch is similar to put, but it is used to update partially the data, and delete is of course used to remove the data. Each of these requests, as I said, perform a specific action on the resource, but there are also the verbs like add, options, connect, and trace. I won't cover HTTP in detail here, it's out of the scope of this guide, but I will link a bunch of links to documentation pages related to this topic. If you want to find more, you will find all the links in the video description. So let's perform our first request, so our first get request. So we will use the get method to perform get request to the GitHub API. All the data that we want. So before we actually do the request, let me just explain what's going to happen. All the data that we want to request are publicly accessible. So we are going to request public repositories of a user. Therefore, we don't need to authenticate our application. However, unauthenticated requests are limited, but for the scope of this tutorial, this is perfectly fine. If you, however, plan to put this project in production, then you might want to look at how to make authenticated requests and obtain an API key from GitHub. But for now, we are not going to do that. It's fine for our project, for our tutorial. So let's get started and see what we can get from GitHub. So GitHub provides clear and in-depth documentation about its REST API, of course, including a list of resources that can be requested and their endpoint. So the endpoint is the place where we will actually make the request. We will use and I'll show you what I mean in a second. We will use a list repositories for a user, and all the resources are available at this link. Let me open it and show you. So this is the documentation. You find it on docs.github.com, EN for English, REST, references, reference and repos, and this is the chapter that we will use to make the request for our project. So as you see, it gives us an endpoint. This is the place where we should submit the request, and here it shows us also some coding samples. It gives us a list of parameters that we can pass to the request. As you see, there is a placeholder here, and this is the name of the user we want to send requests to and grab this data from. And of course, it tells us what type these parameters should be. So it's string, most of them, except for per page and page, which are integer, and where we should put these parameters. And it says in the header for accept, path is for username, or all the other parameters goes inside the query string. So let me move forward and see how to use this. So if we look at this documentation, we see that we have this placeholder that we need to replace with the actual username of the user. And we will also probably use these two to paginate our results. So results per page, maximum 100 results, we will probably put 20, and page is the number of the page number of the results to fetch. And we will start from the first page. So let's make the first request now. And so we need to go inside our main.js file. I'll leave this just here. Leave this one here. And resides this window like that. Okay. So the first step is actually to write inside the main.js file and create our first view instance. So let me create a new view. Oops. And we grab the element, and it's the one with an ID of app. We can have a data object, and we put some properties in here. And for the API call, I will use a mounted lifecycle hook, and in there I will do the actual API call. So the HTTP request using Axios. So mounted, and in here I will put some code. And in here we need to have some information. So the first thing that I want to do here is to actually use Axios to make the request. And I'll explain it to you in a minute what this does. So Axios.get is to use the get verb, and we need to grab from the documentation the link where submit the request, where it was. So this should be up here. Let me refresh the page, and it should point me right to the chapter that I need to visit. Nope. Let's make this bigger. Repositories. List repositories for a user. Okay, so the endpoint is this one, but we need the main link. So the main link is going to be this one. And this is going to be actually our link. So we can move this on the side again. And I will use the backtick because I will construct this one in a different way. So let me say, let's grab from my account the repositories. So I will also have a query string, because I said I want to use the per page. It's going to be equal to some sort of properties that we are going to define in a minute. This per page. And then we can add another parameter for the page, and we said that we want to start from page 1 and let's use this page. So I have constructed query string and I've used these two properties from the view instance, so from the data object, which are not there yet. So let me create them. So per page is gonna be 20 and page is gonna be 1, but let's see what else we need. Okay, so we have the basic structure for our link. We have everything we need. Now we need to actually handle this request, and we need to use the then method. Let me go on a new line and handle the actual response. So in here we can use for now just a console log and see the response. Let's save. So what this does actually, so we have the Axios.get method, which returns a promise, and this promise needs to be handled, and that's why we use the then method on the promise to handle the response. The response variable is provided by the promise, and we can handle it using this arrow function and log to the console the actual content of the response, which should be the data that we get from GitHub if we did everything correctly. But in case there isn't any error, maybe the server is down or anything like that, we can use the catch method to catch an error. And for now, what we can do is just use the arrow function and log it to the console. Okay, so we have everything we need, and we can start this one using the live server and see if we make the requests correctly. So open it with live server, which is an extension that I have on VS Code. Of course, onto the page we don't see anything because the template is empty, but we should see something inside the console. We see an error. Let's see, try to load resource, the sub responded with status 404 for the favicon. That doesn't matter. We have an object here, and that's the response that we wanted from GitHub. So that's the response generated by line 13 of my main.js file. Let's see if this one correct. It's the correct one. So this is the one. Okay, so we have the response, and our data are constructed by the response provided by Axios in a certain way. We have some properties for this object. We have the config property, the data property, headers, request status, which is useful if we want to check if the request has been successful. Otherwise, we have the catch method, and we have this data property which contains all our repositories. So all the repository for this user. For now, it only gave me four data because only the public repositories, because the other one are private. But I could use another account probably instead of this one. Let me see if I remember the account name, where I have a bit more repos, and it's FPHWD. Instead of this one, we can make the request to this one, and we should see more data appearing in a minute. So we have this object, and we have this data with 20 repositories. So we have a good list of objects we can use for our project. So we need to store this data somewhere inside our Vue.js application, of course. So if we go to the Vue tab, we don't see anything except this page and per page properties, because we have not done anything with this response yet. So the data actually are inside the response.data, so all our projects. So if we create a projects property and we assign to it the content of the response.data, And of course, we need to add projects, and we can say this is going to be an empty array for now. So we should, when we make this call, we take the data and we save them inside this projects array. So when we need, we can manipulate this information and work with them from our view instance. Let's see when we refresh the page if the root has of our view instance as this project now array, and in here we have 20 objects. Each object has its own properties, and these are those that we want to take to showcase the projects inside our portfolio. So let me actually, let's break this code down again. So first we have created new view instance and used the EL property and assigned to it the root HTML element, the one with an ID above. Then we have defined the data object, and in here we define three properties. So these three. So we have defined these three properties that we have later used to perform the HTTP request and then the response. After the data object, we define the lifecycle hook that we will use to run our code once the root element has been mounted. So we actually run the Axios call. Inside the mounted method, we performed the first HTTP request using Axios, and since Axios is a promise-based HTTP client, when we use the get method to request data from the GitHub API, so the REST API of GitHub, it will return a promise that needs to be handled. This is done using the syntax axios.get, this one. So this is the syntax that we need to perform the request, and we have then handled the response of this request using the .then method on the promise. If the request fails, so we use this one to handle the response, and if this request fails, Axios gives us the catch method that we can use to handle the error. And in this case, we have just taken the error inside the console, so we show the error in the console. So inside the get method, we have created the URL where to send the actual request. So we use the API endpoint, and we added a query string using the per page and the page parameters to submit the request that we have later entered inside the then method. In the then method, we first use the response from the response variable that the promise gives to us, and we output its content inside console using the console log. And after that, we created a project property inside the data object, and we stored all the response data object inside this array. So now that we have correctly made this request, we can and we stored all the projects inside the projects property inside the object. In the data object, yes, we can use the before directive to show each project onto the page. So now let's go inside the HTML file, and it's time to show the data in here. So we can use the before directive to do that. The project's property, as in this case, contains an array of object, and each object, as I said before, has its own properties that we can use to populate our template. If we go back to the page and we expect one of the objects, so if we go on the root element of the view instance and we expect one of the objects, we see that we have many properties for each object. We are going to take some of them, not all of them. So we have the archive URL the blobs URL, clone URL. Let's say we have more, which is we can click on the three ellipses to open them. We have the Git URL. We have the HTML URL, which is the link to the actual project. We should have also, we have more. We should also have the owner object inside this response, which should give us the avatar URL that we can use to show the picture for the user. And we have more, even more properties, and then that's it. Okay, we have a lot of properties to work with. We will use just few of them for now. So let me, we will take the full name, which should be here somewhere. Full name, let me see if here we have. So we can take the full name of the project to show the title for the project. We can take the owner avatar URL to show the picture, and we can take the HTML URL so that the user can click on it and visit the page. So let me construct this and I'll explain it to you in a second what it does. So we have a div and we can use the before directive and say project in projects. So that's the standard before directive, and then we can have an h2 for title. So we have a class title, and in here we can use template strings to say project, mustache syntax, project dot full name. So that's the first property that I want to take from each object. After that, I want to show some information for the author. And I'll use an image, and this image I will bind, use the vbind directive, this src, the source attribute, so that I can write actual URL using the property that I have on the view instance. So project dot html, sorry, owner. So I want to show the image for the owner, so it would be the owner dot avatar URL, should be written like that, just have me. And after that we can have a div with a class view, and we can show a button, or it's just a link for now, where the user can click and visit. So of course we need the vbind directive so that we can write our project dot html URL like that, and we can just write view in here. So we should have everything. So we picked the full name, the avatar URL, and the HTML URL, and we should see that for each project. So 20 project. Let's see if it works. Okay, for each project, let's resize a bit this image. We can use the width, and let's say 50. Okay, that's pretty much fine now. Okay, we can of course make this nicer, but for now what I'm interested in is just to use the actual Axios library and make the call. In a future video we will make this look nicer and use the design that I created for the final project, so everything will look very, very nice. But for now, so we have a title, we have the image, and if we click this view button link, we should go to the repo that I have on the page, and that's a fork of accounting. So that's fine. So we have many repos. We have 20 of them. I don't know how many repos I actually have on the account, but it worked. So let me recap a bit what I've done here. So we use the v4 directive to loop over the array of projects. Now that the project variable contains a single object that represents a single repository on the GitHub account, we can use it to output all the details that we want onto the screen. So looking at the response object, we know that we can grab a number of properties from each object. We did that. So we have a number of properties available. And what we've done, we picked the full name which is the full name of the repository, the owner.avatar URL, which is the URL of the profile picture for the account, then the HTML underscore URL, which is the property that it's the actual link URL of the repo, and that's all we needed. So if we now look at the page, we see that all the information are onto the page. So there's nothing more here that we've done, nothing new. The only thing new we did is here inside this mounted lifecycle look. So it's actually hidden. In the next video, we are going to look at another view library called View Router that we will use also in our final project to make it really nice. Until the next time, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment if you have any question. Stay safe, guys. Bye.